Kindred by Octavia Butler. Produced by Sammy LaRusso, Sarah Downs, Leanne Riel, April Inman, Gabby Gazinski, and Emily Hawking. Created using the site wixsite.com.
Author's biography. Octavia Butler. On June 22, 1947, Octavia Butler was born in Pasadena, California. Her father was a shoeshine man that passed away when she was very young, thus leaving her in the sole care of her mother, Octavia Sr. In order for Octavia Sr. to provide for her family, she worked as a housemaid. Despite having dyslexia, Butler loved to read. New books, however, were not in the budget, so her mother would give her old books from the white families that she worked for. Octavia Butler once said, "If my mother hadn't put up with all those humiliations, I wouldn't have eaten very well or lived very comfortably. So I wanted to write a novel that would make others feel the history, the pain and fear that Black people have had to live through in order to endure." Butler went on to earn an associate degree from Pasadena City College and study at California State University. It was at this time she became a protege of Ellison, a well-known science fiction writer. This opportunity allowed her to better develop the science fiction writing that she became famous for, often including both female and Black protagonists. Throughout her career, Butler received 2 Hugo Awards, 2 Nebula Awards, and was the first science fiction writer to be awarded a MacArthur Fellowship. On February 24, 2006, Octavia Butler passed away, leaving behind her thought-provoking work that continues to serve as a catalyst for social change. Today, authors like Jemison, Hopkinson, and Shaw continue to create similar works addressing culture, gender, and racism.
Other works written by Octavia Butler include several series, individual novels, and a short story collection. The Xenogenesis series includes Dawn, Adulthood Rights, and Imago. The series is science fiction and includes topics about the relationship between humans and extraterrestrial creatures. The Parable series includes Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. This includes topics of religion, poverty, community, and more within a dystopia and the science fiction genre. The Patternist series includes Mind of My Mind, Pattern Master, Survivor, Wild Seed, and Clay's Ark. The series is science fiction and includes themes of transformation and identity. Butler also created a collection of science fiction short stories called Bloodchild and Other Stories. Her last and most recent work is Fledging, which is a science fiction novel about vampires and discovery. Critics' critiques. Adapting any prose novel to the graphic format is an audacious undertaking at the best of times, but translating Octavia E. Butler's fearsomely powerful work in particular must surely have been a Herculean task. Yet Damian Duffy and John Jennings have managed it, a worthy and powerful supplement to a classic. New York Times Book Review. Taken together, the graphic novel adaptation of Kindred is not to be missed as a solid piece of entertainment. But if someone were to ask me why they should read Kindred, I'd tell them it's because Kindred deftly portrays a part of American history that we don't dare forget. John DiNardo, Kirkus Review. Kindred is an emotional book as it takes you from the present to the past without allowing time to sort out your feelings with what you just read and what you will anticipate further on in the book. Huffington Post. You want teens to young adults to pick up this book and say, "Hey, this is really, really disturbing and beautiful, and I want to know about this woman. I want to know more about this person and how she writes and why she was writing what she was writing." John Jennings, National Public Radio.
Themes. One of the themes in this book was capitalism, which is a large part of slavery itself, and it is shown when Kevin and Dana meet doing low-paying jobs for crappy bosses. Race is another, and it becomes abundantly clear when Dana first talks to Rufus and he tries to figure out whether or not she is a slave, and she has to explain to him that using the N-word to address her is not appropriate in her time. Unsupportive families can be considered a theme in this book, and it is first shown when Kevin and Dana tell their parents they plan to get married. Individual versus society is a large theme in both the past and the present of this book. While Dana is working odd jobs, there aren't enough for everyone, and while Dana is in the past, she is literally just trying to fit into a society that takes away all of her free will. Feminism is shown multiple times throughout the story, whether it be in a thought bubble or Dana actually makes her feelings known. For example, when she talks to Rufus about raping Alice, and she makes it very clear that she does not support his actions. Finally, death is a present theme in the book. For Dana, disappearing each time she is about to die, or some of the characters actually dying.
The graphic novel helps to enhance the trend of strong women, with not only its literary representation of the women in the story, but letting the reader see the characters as black women in the 1800s. It is easy to forget the race of characters while reading. This adaptation of the story makes sure that the reader never forgets who the main character really is. Seeing what happens to the women in the story makes it hit home how strong they truly are. For example, when Butler writes Rufus trying to rape Dana, she thinks, "I would never be to him what Tess had been to his father, a thing passed around like a whiskey jug at a husking. He wouldn't do that to me, or sell me, or, no." Following this thought, Dana proceeds to throw Rufus off of her and defend herself, displaying how she is a strong woman. The other women in the time have learned to live with the actions of the men that surround them. Dana, on the other hand, knows what it is like to be free and treated equally by a white man. The next trend that stands out is that some people and things will never change. One commonality between the two time periods in the book is abuse. For example, when Dana returns from the 1800s after being beaten, her friend comes over to her house and says, "I never thought you'd be fool enough to let a man beat you." In this quotation, Butler writes Dana's friend, Julie, to believe that Kevin beat her. Similarly, Butler writes that conversation between Sarah and Dana in the 1800s where Sarah asks about Kevin. "He ever beat you?" "No, of course not." "My man did. He'd tell me I was the only one he cared about. Then, next thing I knew, he'd say I was looking at some other man, and he'd go to hittin'." Through writing these two quotations from different time periods, Butler demonstrates the idea that some things do not change across time periods. For example, husbands abusing their wives. The third and most important trend, in our opinion, is that your environment influences your actions and general mental health. Throughout the story, there are many instances in which the environment influences the way that the characters act and think. For example, Rufus is raised by a man who treats blacks very badly and who cares mainly about money. In turn, Rufus turns into a man who also abuses and rapes black people and would rather sell them to get the money than preserve their friendships. Additionally, Dana worries about having Kevin in the 1800s with her. She thinks, "A place like this would endanger Kevin in a way I didn't want to talk about to him. If he was stranded here for years, some part of this place would rub off on him." In this quotation, Butler writes Dana to worry that if Kevin is stuck on a plantation for many years, part of him will start to believe that this is how black people should be treated. These trends are brought more into the spotlight because of the adaptation of the story. Readers can get a little more out of the story with the help of the artwork. Foci. The focus of the graphic novel is to show how the main character, Dana's, life is changed by her sudden ability to time travel. She is brought back in time against her will. As a free modern black woman, she is pulled to a dark time in black history by a young white boy she soon learns is named Rufus. This boy, who she saves, is not just someone random. He is her ancestor, who she never knew was white. She soon learns that the young boy she saved is who called her to the 1800s. His fear of death brings her there, and her own fear of death takes her back home. As she goes on this journey, she gets stuck in the 1800s for longer periods of time. The time elapsed is not the same in modern times. Every time she comes back to Rufus's time, years have passed, when not as much time has passed for her. While on the plantation, she conforms to the role of the slave woman who are trapped there, while trying to keep the modern woman inside her strong. Rufus seems changed by Dana's presence, but she soon learns that it is hard to change a white man in the 1800s. He does have 2 sons with a free black woman named Alice, but he still acts like his father did. After the mother of his children kills herself, he puts his sights on Dana for comfort. He still treats her like a black woman of his time, attempting to take advantage of her after they have saved each other's lives multiple times. Dana must stand up for herself, and in doing so, she ends the thing that had been calling her back to the dark times. She saves herself after her existence in the future is set in stone. Like all time travel stories, the reader must ask, without Dana's intervention, would she get to live the same life she was currently living? It seems that her modern day strength is what gave her the chance to live her life.
There are also many paradigms within Butler's story. For example, the idea of sexualizing women. This common occurrence is shown in Butler's graphic novel. For example, Butler writes, "Later I did most of the laundry myself when Tom Whalen started casually taking Tess to bed and hurt her. Tess was just grateful not to be pregnant. There were many slave children who looked more like Whalen than Rufus did." This quotation outlines the fact that Mr. Whalen has used many of his slaves simply for their bodies. He, as well as Rufus, often view women as an object for sex rather than a human being. Similarly, another paradigm is the idea of viewing slaves as inhuman. Throughout the story, Butler writes many instances in which the slaves are not treated as another human being. For example, after Dana stands up for herself to Mr. Whalen, he responds, "Rufus always said you didn't know your place any better than a wild animal." In this quotation, Butler writes Mr. Whalen to compare Dana to a wild animal rather than to look at her as a human. In addition, Butler includes the idea that slaves were not only viewed as inhuman, but also they were viewed as property. This is shown in Kindred when Mr. Whalen is happy about Nigel and Carrie getting married and rewards them for it. Butler writes Nigel to say, "See, 'cause of Carrie and me, he's one slave richer." This quotation demonstrates how Mr. Whalen views them as his property. One day Carrie and Nigel's babies will also be his slaves, which means he will have more property to make money from. Another paradigm of the story is the idea of unhealthy relationships, which are common throughout all time periods. In the story, the relationship between Rufus and Alice is especially unhealthy. Butler writes, "I finally understood that he loved Alice, to her misfortune. There was no shame in raping a black woman, but there could be shame in loving one. Rufus loves Alice, however, he expresses it through raping her and eventually buying her and possessing her." Butler also discusses appearance stereotypes. Throughout the book, Butler writes many of the characters to question why Dana dresses the way that she does. For example, when Dana helps save Rufus from catching his house on fire, Butler writes Rufus to say, "You were wearing pants like a man, the way you are now. I thought you were a man, but this time you look like a woman wearing pants." In this quotation, Butler writes Rufus to vocalize his stereotypes about the way women should and should not dress or look. This continues throughout the book as characters, like Alice, try to make dresses and other outfits for Dana, saying things like, "I'm sick of seeing you in those pants. At least you can look like a woman when your man comes for you." This goes along with the paradigm of women judging other women. Additionally, another paradigm is the idea of intelligence being looked down upon. Dana is often turned to in the 1800s for her intelligence. She is able to read and write, and she knows more about medical things than others on the plantation. She is often warned, however, not to flaunt her intelligence or let the white people know about it. For example, Nigel warns Dana, "You'll get in trouble. Marse Tom don't like you educated coming from a free state. He don't want no blacks around here talking better than him, putting freedom ideas in our heads." In this quotation, Butler emphasizes how intelligence is viewed as a way to rebel. Her intelligence is something that makes many of the characters accuse her of believing she is white, leading to the paradigm of the stereotype of white blacks. In the book, Dana is ridiculed by white and black people for acting like she is white, as if she is not aware of the color of her skin. They think this because of the way she talks and the way that she stands up for herself. For example, Butler writes Mrs. Whalen to say, "I swear if I close my eyes while you talk, I forget you're black." In addition to these paradigms, the book also discusses the idea of white people illegally helping slaves to reach freedom through Kevin's actions of helping to feed the slaves and guide them in the right direction. The idea of multiple definitions of freedom is also discussed. For example, people like Alice in the book were born free and are now a slave. Dana only experiences freedom when she is in the present time, and other people have been slaves their whole lives. Butler also includes views on interracial marriage through Dana and Kevin's family reactions, as well as the reactions from people in the 1800s. Additionally, Butler discusses family history as Dana tries to protect her family lineage by making sure that Rufus, her great-grandfather, does not die. Furthermore, as Dana travels through time, Butler discusses how people change with age, and now kids want attention. As most kids, Rufus wants attention from his dad. This causes him to do things like burn the curtains. Also, as a kid, he relies on Dana as a mother-type figure to save his life, but as he ages, this turns into sexual desires.
And these are our works cited. Thank you for watching.